what would you say to authors who are struggling to write, who want to write about characters who travel across borders, especially when these authors haven't traveled to that country? How to go about writing such characters?
Yeah, it's difficult. There's, again, Stephen King, The Truth Within the Lie. And there's an unwritten rule in fiction. If you need to occupy the Eiffel Tower for, a setting or a scene, then that's fine. Take it out, everybody out. I need to work here. But you need to be authentic. So, particularly when you're crossing borders, it's not just setting. It's food, it's culture, it's language, and you have to remain authentic to wherever your setting is taking place. Now, how deeply you get into that is entirely up to you, what type of writer you are. But the details that you do provide, they should be spot on, because someone somewhere is gonna call it out, is gonna spot it. You know. So if you're in Moscow, for example, I've never been to Moscow, so I'll do, an extensive amount of research on Moscow. Um, you the local culture, the foods, the streets. I'll Google map. I'll read travel blogs of people who have been, and I'll pick up some very authentic and very key pieces. And quite frankly, I spend a lot of time on Google Map. And if there is a Hard Rock Cafe, for example, in Moscow, then I'll Google it and I'll look at the pictures and I'll place the neon sign exactly where it is, right? But I'm very selective about those details. You can give just enough to give it a feel of authenticity without belaboring it. Um, Whereas if it's London, I'm very familiar with London, then I can go to town. I can get right into the minutia. Like I lived in Delhi for 6 years. It was very easy for me to write about Delhi. At the time, I hadn't I hadn't lived in Mumbai. I'd only visited once. So you'll notice the Mumbai phase of the book when they're writing down 48. I skimmed through it pretty quickly. There's a few details um, that mention Mumbai and lend it authenticity, but I don't dwell there because I simply don't know the place, right? Whereas in the sequel, it's set in Mumbai because now I've lived here for 6 years. So so my advice to writers that want to sort of set something in an area or town or village or even a building that they've never been, do your research, pick up a few key, undisputable sort of facts about the place, and filter them in, pepper them in. Don't make it a focal point of the story, but you can pepper them in just to lend authenticity. I think readers are fairly forgiving unless there's a glaring mistake. If you have the Eiffel Tower upside down, they're going to say, "Hey, wait a minute, that's not right." Um, so they're fairly forgiving as long as the facts that you do present are true to that area.
Yeah. Okay, okay. Because I've always wondered at what point do these details about characters and places, especially places, at what point do they become too much? So I feel, yeah, your point of authenticity and not letting the focus dwindle. That's
Yeah.
ideal. Because
Characters are a different thing.
yeah,
If you're writing about a nurse or a firefighter or uh, a stockbroker, then you need to talk to them and you need to know what the day to day is, what the ins and outs are, particularly if they're your main character. Reader is not so forgiving when it comes to characters. Setting, you can fudge your way through that, but characters have to be authentic. Yeah, there's really no way around that. There's just far too many people that'll read your work that are either associated with the position your character's in, or know someone, or have been there themselves, or whatever, and they'll call it out immediately. So characters, you need to be a lot more, and I'm talking strictly profession here. Emotional register is completely different. Everybody's different, and you have some leniency there. But if you're writing about a cop in New York City, then you best have talked to a cop in New York City, or done a lot of research, about cops in New York to fully understand how that character is driven, what his motivations are, so on and so on.
right, right. Because ultimately, readers connect to characters and their emotions. The rest of the details can be okay. About this character detailing, while you were talking about it, I recall that the current winner of Booker Prize, David, now who wrote Flesh, I read that he had somewhere, skipped talking about the looks of the characters, and I've read a few authors who kind of skip such details about how the character, their main protagonist, looks like, and that kind of intrigued me, that you leave it to the imagination of the reader. I thought, as a as a budding author, I thought that it is very important to write about the details of the of how, at least how the protagonist looks like. But looks like probably that is also not something, that is something that you can skip if the emotions are in the right place. So
The only details you need include is ones that directly affect your plot. I mean, you can throw in the odd line for authenticity and for setting and for atmosphere, but don't belabor them. Um, Particularly, you raise a very good point about the protagonist. I've read many stories where you have a very clear, vivid picture of what the protagonist looks like because it's important to the plot. If they only have one eye or a lisp or, one earlobe's longer than the, but it has to make sense. It has to be a plot-driven point. Otherwise, leave it out. Readers will paint very scant details. Give an approximate age. Weathered skin is good enough. You don't have to go into detail about, scarred and thatched and unless it's relevant to the plot. If you're talking about a fisherman that spent years at sea, then it's worth going into the leathery skin on his forehead and all that sort of thing. But if it's not, if him being a fisherman and spending all that time at sea isn't directly related or directly correlates with a plot point that it's a story about isolation or whatever it is, then there's really no need to emphasize it. You can allow the reader freedom to sort of paint their own mental image.
they say that in order to engage the readers or put your characters in difficult situations that truly test them. So, how can we create such situations, and more importantly, how do we keep the reader engaged with our while our characters struggle to stay afloat or struggle to stay alive in the story?
Conflict, yes.
Yeah.
Without con without conflict, there is no story. There must be conflict. I'm a bugger for just I shovel conflict after conflict. I just lump it on my characters until even I feel bad for them. Like, oh my God, how can they survive this?
Okay, that's
Um,
enough.
yeah, you see, the thing with conflict is, in whatever you're writing, conflict. A lot of new writers will shy away from conflict. Because as soon as you use the word conflict, you think war, you're thinking grandiose, you know, uh, uh, fist fights and stabbings but conflict on a very basic level can be something as simple as someone running down the corridor because the elevator doors are closing and they're late for work and they can't be late for work anymore, because they're going to get fired, right? That's a conflict, right? And the shoe comes off. Oh, hey, okay, that's more. Now you've lumped on a little bit more, right? Uh, they call for the hold the door, but the person in the elevator doesn't hear them. You've lumped on more conflict. See, so it doesn't necessarily have to be this grandiose, uh, sort of massive, explosions and conflict can be subtle. Conflict is something that resonates with your character, and how to keep the reader engaged is the best kind of conflict is something that they can identify with. So, for example, we've all been late for work. We've all been sweating. Oh man, I was late last week as well. I'm gonna get yelled at for this. So if you can create conflict that resonates with the reader, that the reader can identify with, it rings authentic. It makes it, it gives your character depth. It gives your character a lot more believability. So as far as conflict, yeah, lump it on, man. Just bury your characters in conflict. It's easy enough to dial it back later, right? But there's nothing worse than a character sort of drifting through a story with no direction and no motivation and um, conflict tells everything. Conflict not just propels your plot, but it gives insight into the character. It gives It gives you a story of soul. You know, what is the story about? You know, what is it? What is the overlying theme? It all comes from the conflict. So yeah, lump on as much as you can, and try not to think of it in, like I said, these massive, these because that gets overwhelming, right? I mean, if you're trying to deal with these huge scopes of things and these massive conflicts, it can really overwhelm, not just the writer but the reader as well. Like if you're dealing with war, let's use war because I brought that up. Like don't deal with global conflict. Don't try to lump all that in. Just show me a child's burning sock on the pavement. That's enough, you know? So and I mean that creates its own tension. That's conflict. You don't need to deal with the overall overarching themes.
And ultimately, the reader connects with individual emotions. We have to kind of break down the emotions for them. Even in the middle of war, there are so many emotions involved in a war scene. So I think if we are able to break it down and kind of filter it to an individual level, that this is what was happening. Like you mentioned that beautiful analogy, the child sock burning on the pavement. It sees a lot of things. Which is your favorite format? Is it short stories or is it writing novels or novellas?
Oh, I enjoy novellas. I'm a novel writer. I do write a lot of short stories, but I find that oddly to be more out of circumstance than sort of desire. I'm asked to contribute, or sometimes it's a little bit of hubris. Like I'll be scrolling through Instagram and I'll see a short story anthology looking for, and the theme will either intrigue me or, so and novel writing it's a journey, right? I mean, it's like pack a lunch. It's going to take a while to get through this,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of dead space. For me, drafting is very, very quick. You know, I said it took me 4 years to write my first novel. Uh, and that I think that topped out similar to you about 75,000 or 80,000 words. Whereas the sequel to that is 130,000 words, and I wrote it in about 6 weeks. So I'm a very quick writer. I draft very, very quickly. I've knocked out an 80,000 word one last year, and about the same time, in about 4 weeks. I just wrote a 60,000 word in 3 weeks. I got I draft very, very quickly, but the editing phase takes time. And oh, God bless those that can sort of put their editing hat on and stick with it. I can't. I need a break. I do very distinct stages of editing, and I need a break in between. Um, and that's where the short stories sort of fill the gap. Because many years ago, it was either a colleague or a short story, a writing coach told me that when the faucet's running, don't turn it off. And that's stuck with me, right? And so I'm scared to turn it off. I'm scared, like I don't stop. I'm scared that if I turn it off, I'll open it again and there'll be no water. I'll be out of talent. So I just keep writing, so to fill these spaces in between editing or drafting or, I'll fill them with short stories. So novel definitely, is my preferred format. Um, but I do enjoy novellas as well. And I like writing short stories. Like novels are like an affair, whereas novellas are kind of a May December romance, and then short stories are like a quick kiss in the dark sort of thing, So I mean, they all have certain appeal to them. But if I could only write one, it would be novels for sure.
Tell us about your next project. And are you planning to dive into a genre you've never written before? Maybe a fantasy, probably, or something.
Maybe. Yeah, depends where it leads me.
Yeah.
Um, I've got a few things on the go at the moment. I've just I'm shopping one novel right now completed. It's out there trying to get some interest. Actually, two manuscripts I've got. One's a historical thriller, and one's a dystopian thriller. Um, so they're both out there, um, done and dusted. Hopefully, they'll get picked up. And then I've just completed a manuscript, which is a murder mystery that's yet to be edited in detail. Right, we're at the dreaded editing phase. Um,
Feel
it's
that.
actually I'm excited about it because it's something I haven't tried from perspective yet. It's written in first person, and I tend to write in third close. Um, and it's not really a whodunit. I open with the murder, so it's more of a howdunit. And I was very excited about it. So I've got the first draft out, let it stew for a little while, and then get into the editing for that.
Yeah.
And yeah, and currently I'm writing a short story for a horror anthology on urban ghost stories. I was commissioned to contribute to it. So and I need to get that finished. I was actually working on it this morning. Need to
Oh,
get that finished in the next 4 or 5 days. I just finished up the syllabus for my master classes on character writing. So that's something else that sort of fills in my time. You know, I run these master classes writing horror fiction and creating believable characters. And I've got a session coming up in March, so I had to finish up the syllabus for that as well. So yeah, busy, busy, busy.
so this will be for IQC, Ink and Quill Collective.
Yeah, it'll be made available through IQC. Um, but it's not to say that it's exclusive to IQC. I mean, joining IQC is easy enough. You fill out a Google form and you're in. You know, it's not like there's any stringent sort of criteria to meet to join the community. So yeah, it'll be made available through IQC.
Okay, okay. I'll be looking forward to it.
Actually, if it's all right, I told you I was writing this short story this morning.
Yeah,
Um, and I'm particularly chuffed with it. I'd love to read out a paragraph from it that I like.
please do. Yeah.
I quite literally wrote this about 40 minutes ago.
Wow.
I don't know if it'll end up in the final story. Then he saw his eyes. No, not eyes, portals. And no, not saw, was drawn into. And within, the origins of the stagnant Masama were revealed. Those soulless pools of onyx reflected a void, a chasm, a no man's land of gray soil now sodden to clay with blood and entrails, a horrorscape of wispy smoke and naked trees littered with dozens of twisted corpses. Oliver tried to break his gaze, to free himself from the terror, but he could not. He was held there, entrapped by the quagmire of churned mud, imprisoned by the man's glare. He then knew with certainty he was alone in this field of open sores, that he was the only living thing.
That really pierces through the heart. And this is part of your short story.
Yeah, a short story that I need to submit for this urban legends or these urban ghost stories. I've based it on the poem from 1877. The other night upon the stair, I met a man who wasn't there. He wasn't there again today. Oh, how we wish he'd go away. So that's sort of my dad used to tell me that when I was a kid. He used to recite that to me,
I
and it
mean,
sort of
such
sparked this.
yeah, such intense emotions in this, this tiny paragraph that you read out. And I can already foresee you writing an intense romance in the future, That is, and anything else that you would like to share with the audience?
Yeah, absolutely. Buy my books, all of them, and attend all of my courses. Um,
Of course, that goes without saying.
yeah.
That'll be, part of the caption for every reel that I put up.
For the new writers watching or the budding aspiring authors, I think the best words of advice I can pass on, and I'm by no means a guru, but I can tell you that for your first draft, just sit down and write, okay? Don't
Yeah.
edit as you go. Don't stress it. Don't overthink it. Don't sweat it. Don't go back and reread what you've written. Don't write 2 chapters and give it to a friend. Please tell me I'm wonderful. Just write it. Just get it done. Start to finish. There's lots of time to fix it later. So just write that first draft.
I mean, I don't know if you recall, but about, I think, 2 years ago, we had spoken over the phone, and that was the time when I had almost finished the first draft of my book. And I was clueless. I was like, okay, should I start sending it out to publishers, or should I self-publish? Which way to go? And you had told me that why are you overthinking? If your motive in life is to write, the means doesn't matter, just write. And that kind of, that pushed me into the direction that ultimately led to this day when I published my book, my first book. So yeah, thank you so much for that.
Very
And
well.